Hyperlight Drifter is an indie game that was created by Alice Preston with this indie company known as Heart Machine and was published with the help of Hyperlight Studios, which began as a passion project crowdfunded by the public via Kickstarter, was later then released in the year 2016. Hyperlight Drifter is also the debut title, with the second item being Solar Ash, a game that not only solidified the ability of Heart Machines to diversify their games, but massively accomplished the task of moving things from what you will see in this game to then achieve a goal to making a game that is fully realized within a 3D environment. I did a review on this game if you want to check it out. The link will be in the description. But anyway, during the time of Hyperlight's development, the creator wrestled and probably still wrestles to this day with the heart complication that he had since birth. Major aspects and imagery of this game's somewhat narrative serves as a mirror reflection of some of the internal battles the creator probably had and is still enduring. It is through this game that not only the player has the opportunity to experience the journey of the protagonist, but also maybe a piece of the creator's emotional revelations as well. Looking at the build of this game before the final product was produced, I see where some changes were done. Certain levels were similarly taken out and a few other cosmetic design changes were made, but for the most part, the gameplay remained the same. Today I'll be rocking out with the PlayStation 4 version, so let's get into it. Just like many other indie games nowadays, the story is not clearly spelled out for you. There is no dialogue spoken in this game whatsoever, but instead the player is presented with pictures that serve as a means to piece together the narrative of what has happened to not only the characters you run into, but to this land. But if I can take a guess at what the story is, I would say that Hyperlight Drifter is a tale about a warrior who is trying to undo a catastrophe that led to the inhabitants of this land residing in a post-apocalyptic state. The enemy being this enigmatic manifestation of the Drifter's sickness that grows stronger with each step that the Drifter takes going forward. I believe the main character is trying to save this land and destroy what is causing this place to be a depressive state before his sickness overtakes him, or even worse, kills him. This is shown through multiple segments where you see the Drifter seemingly coughing up blood and having these hallucinations. I would suspect that many other Drifters have tried to defeat this monster who goes by the name of Judgment, but many have failed or just given up hope. So the fight is left up to the Drifter that you play as to go on this somewhat last suicidal mission to bring peace. The visuals are some of the most beautiful pixelated spectacles that I've seen within a video game. The vibrant neon colors pop out in conjunction with the different themed landscapes is something to behold. There were moments where I literally just had to take a few minutes just to pause and appreciate some of the set pieces that can easily be captured and used for beautiful wallpaper on your computer, and awesome poster just to hang on your wall. What I see most people do, use it as a VFX while lo-fi music plays in the background. I can see how Hyperlight Drifter can give off the nostalgia feel, seeing how it's designed. It kind of reminds me of some of the old game classics that I love. Again, since there's no verbal dialogue within this game, all you have to go off of is what you see. Considering this kind of makes your environments a very huge clue in order for you to draw a conclusion as to what is going on, or rather what has happened. This especially goes for those giants whose bits and pieces that you will see lying about, but for the most part, the player has to pretty much go through 4 different sections of this game, which to me is a representation of the natural seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall, with the somewhat futuristic and cyberpunk elements peppered throughout. But overall, as far as the visuals go, the animations are gorgeous and often quite very cute in regards to what you see some of the characters do. It kind of gives them personality. Now there is one aspect that is ever present, but because things look so beautiful, it's sometimes overlooked, and that's the fact that this game has some very dark undertones. You have oceans of water seemingly made of blood, creatures casually throwing corpses along with the rest into a pile, and sometimes the bosses look like very horrible mutations of some sort going terribly wrong. Speaking of character models, the Drifter that you play as seemingly looks the most human with the exception that his skin is blue, and most of the world's inhabitants look like some type of humanoid alien with Eastern culture influence attire, an anthropomorphic creature based on some type of animal, or just robots. You see, to me, it's the details that I appreciate the most, which shows a lot of time and effort was put into crafting Hyperlight's world. The gameplay is something that can be difficult depending on some variables, but the primary factor is how well you're good at thinking on your feet and how well you can maneuver through obstacles. The Drifter that the player controls can move in various directions. For offensive means, you have this sword for close quarter combat and the laser pistol for long range combat. The ammo that is required for your firearms refills by hitting and destroying your enemies. And as for defensive measures, well, don't get hit. Just stick and move. As a matter of fact, the best defensive measures for the player is your evasive maneuvers. This comes within the form of having the ability to dash quickly to move away from enemy attacks. Now, the opponents that you come across all have their own unique attack patterns that will help the player be aware of them. It's very easy when there are only a few enemies to deal with, but at moments this game will put the player in a situation where there'll be multiple types of enemies that you'll have to contend with, and sometimes within seemingly compact spaces. The more adaptive and familiar with the enemy types that you become, the more he or she will find themselves entering this Zen mode, when before long they will find themselves dancing across the screen defeating enemies with ease. Now, figuring out where to go and where the important things are shown by this map. You can travel either by foot, or once unlocked, you can fast travel via these large paths that the player will find scattered throughout the world. Once used, the player will be able to teleport to another area with their health replenished, but doing so will automatically respawn all the enemies within the area you just left. So, going back, expect a welcoming party. As I was playing Hyperlight Drifter, it wasn't too long before I figured out the loop. Or should I say the pattern that HLD is going to use in order for the player to finish the game. You see, there will be 4 major sections that the Drifter will be exploring, and within each of those sections there will be an inhabitant that when interacted with will pretty much show the Drifter on the map where the area's boss is located, and the important areas that you need to check out. That then ultimately becomes your destination, but before you get there, you have to go through puzzles and enemies to find these small black things that the player has to activate. You have to trigger 4 of these in order to fight the main boss within that area. However, there are more to find, bringing the total to 8. But this is optional. Some of these monoliths can only be accessed after obtaining skills and specific things later on in the game for you to even have a shot at getting to them. Not to mention that there are doors that stand in between you and your progress depending on how many monoliths was activated. But when the player finally reaches the boss and destroyed them, typically a new weapon in a bigger monolith is revealed that needed to be activated. After you do this, the player has to do this over and over again for another major section. But to help aid the player on their journey are these green health packs that the player can use in order to heal themselves. But be sure to position yourself away from enemies when using them, or else that health that you tried to get back gets knocked right out of you. That healing animation needs some time to animate. Also along your journey, the player will come across these yellow boxes that you have to break in order to get. These things are very, and I do mean very important, seeing as though this is actually your currency needed to purchase your upgrades. You have to find 4 to equal 1 big yellow square, which would in turn allow you to obtain your upgrades when you have enough. You will be able to purchase your upgrades located at these various shops in the hub town where you start off at the beginning of the game. You can purchase expansions on your health, ammo, new techniques and such. And if you haven't figured it out yet, exploring will be what rewards the player with a better chance of overcoming things that will be kicking you behind if not prepared. So in other words, don't rush through this game unless you want some frustrating times ahead of you, and especially with the bosses. For a game that's so tight-knitted, there are so many hidden areas. A major hint to know that if you're about something that is either hidden or needs to be observed closely will always have this little insignia around it. And lastly, what the player will find are these things I like to call codes, which will be collected and needed to interact with these hieroglyphic tablets. Now for the criticisms. I only have 3. The first criticism that I have is doing that drifter mechanic. So when the player purchased the upgrade to do multiple consecutive dodges, it comes with its own little trick to it. Pressing the dodge button multiple times will be easy, but that isn't the case here. If you want to consistently dash around, you have to hit the dash button and then continue with each press being quicker than the last, essentially timing your presses like a drummer playing slowly and then picking up the pace. Doing this move takes dedication and practice just to get the hang of it. Oftentimes when I was just trying to get away from things coming at me, my mind doesn't always go to think about keeping up with a certain tempo. I just want to get out the way. And number 3, there are also other things that you can unlock, like different color outfits that provide their own type of buffs and attributes to the drifter, all of which never actually tell you what they do due to the game staying consistent with this non-dialogue approach, to a fault. Most people I know just Wikipedia it for the info. You can obtain different color swords and even that thing that follows you around. I do know that there is one outfit that can be unlocked, but it will require for the player to do this infamous 800 dash challenge. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it if you have arthritis, and good luck to you. And as for the tips, I do have 3. Number 1, use a gun that shoots multiple projectiles for maximum damage. I personally love the shotgun. Each of the scattered shots coming from this weapon will equate to multiple hits when up close and personal with the enemy. Number 2, focus on purchasing upgrades that you practically need. And number 3, do not go to your inventory screen while in the midst of a conflict. This isn't the pause button, you know. You will die and literally not see it coming. And that's about it. Hyperlight Drifter's gameplay emphasizes being agile. Having to run physically to hit your enemy in order to refill your ammo promotes not spamming the bullets and gives the player no choice but to engage. That right there is something that I love making this game fun. Nice to come back to every so often for nostalgia purposes. But after replaying Hyperlight Drifter, I really didn't notice this as much, but the different suits, beating monsters in their own sections with the last area being where you started off, signs showing hidden areas, it's evident and quite obvious that a lot of these ideas was translated over to Solar Ash. Check out the gameplay session of that review if you don't believe me. The sound design of Hyperlight Drifter was done very well. Hearing your sword getting shoved into the ground after a victory is very satisfying. Then hearing some of your enemies can give off cues as to when they're about to attack you, which can be useful as far as the gameplay goes. When the player begins doing multiple consecutive dashes, I like hearing when the drifter when he slides across the room. But when he hits the wall, the impact personally made me feel like, I felt it. And oh yeah, hearing those high-pitched sounds when unlocking something and hearing the sound of cartridges is going to be something that the player going to have to get used to hearing. And last but most certainly not least is your guns. Each gun the player has of course is different, but the firepower is often expressed in how it sounds. For example, take the default blaster that you start off with. Sounds okay, right? Now let's look at the shotgun. I'm sure you get the message. Now the sound design of a game is but one of many things that makes a game more memorable, and I must say there's a reason why Hyperlight Drifter is iconic. The music of Hyperlight Drifter was done by Richard Vreeland, also known as Disasterpiece, and features some of the most captivating, eclectic, futuristic, and yet something a bit unusual to its texture. There is no better example than this than a somewhat piano ballad entitled Panacea that within a few moments embodies what the sentiment of Hyperlight Drifter is about. With these soft and somber piano keys and these blaring synths coming in every so often. Just hearing this one particular song makes me feel like it's pretty much making a sincere and profound statement. And considering the many interpretations that the player can get from playing this game, and also considering the background of the creator and during the time this game was created, I can believe it. Speaking of synths, one of the major sounds that is heard throughout the OST are these strong and ever-present synths that take center stage on some of these songs. Most tracks on the OST go at this slow to mid pace, but there is this one track that kinda kicks things up a notch, and that song is called The Sentience. Within the game, this is the song that usually plays when you come across some important battle in the game. It just comes out of nowhere galloping in. And then again, on some occasions, hearing the music as opposed to what you see kinda made things a tad bit darker. For example, remember within the presentation when I was talking about creatures throwing corpses into piles? Well, contrary to what you see, the music that plays in the background is so relaxing. But anyway, Disasterpiece has really done a great job in composing the music for this game. This guy has released albums and EPs of his own and was also responsible for music and sound design for video games and films as well. What caught my eye was the iconic Fast game and the fact that he's doing the music for this weird movie that, from what I can tell, is about this self-aware shell. I keep seeing this trailer in the most interesting places and I'm going to see it. But yeah, I would recommend you to check out Disasterpiece's official website so you can check out his works. Links to it can pick up the OST for Hyperlight Drifter and his website will be in the description below as always. Also, don't forget to check out Fragments, which are the B-sides, or should I say more unreleased music that wasn't featured on the original OST. Hyperlight Drifter is a masterpiece. I'm going to give this game a 10 out of 10. This game looks beautiful, the gameplay is responsive and fun. The story thereof grabs the attention of the player, and even after beating the game, it will make the player go back to replay it, just to see if there was anything that was overlooked. There are so many theories that I'm sure that people are still crafting to this very day. One of my personal theories is that these doors is what connects the various worlds, or even the other game titles to each other. But that's just me. Anyway, HLD is a must buy, and it will be doing you a disservice if you haven't played it yet. Hyperlight is now available for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Steam for Mac and PC for only $20. It's also available for Apple iOS for iPhones and iPads for only $5. One thing to note though is that Hyperlight Drifter is also available for the Nintendo Switch. However, that version is a special edition and it has more areas, items, and features not available in other editions, pretty much making this version their definitive experience. The only other way to experience this version is to purchase the iOS. Also, as of this review, Heart Machine is now working on their next game entitled Hyperlight Breaker, which is a return to the HLD's world. For a time, many had speculated that Heart Machine's sophomore game Solar Ash would be a direct sequel to Hyperlight Drifter, but according to Alex Preston, it's not a sequel, although it takes place within the same universe. But as far as Hyperlight Breaker is concerned, I've been looking all around trying to get more information about this new title. So far, I've been finding it better for you to peep out Heart Machine's Tumblr and also their heart-to-heart live streams via their YouTube. Also, peep out the video No Clip did on their YouTube page. It perfectly showcases the evolution of what is now Heart Machine from Hyperlight Drifter to now. Plus, it features some of what I believe to be some gameplay of how the alpha build is like. Also, there's a Hyperlight Drifter RPG tabletop game that was funded on Kickstarter that I think you should take a look at. And if their title is just way too long, they just call it simply Drifter. This project is a collaboration between Metalweave Games and Heart Machine and gives us more Hyperlight Drifter content in terms of likeness, but still clears up the events of the actual HLD game. So on your spare time, go ahead and check it out. But anyway, be safe out there, and peace y'all.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit up that notification bell, and I gotta go.